but that's not technically a true statement because subpar is in golf is like very good.
Yeah.
You're subpar.
Yeah.
We just get so used here. We get so used to that term here in America saying, "Oh, it's so subpar." Like it's not par. But if you're subpar, that's technically like
Still
better.
good.
If it's a
Yeah.
par 4 hole and you do it in 3, that's subpar, but it's better than doing it in 4. So what are we talking about here? That's going to be in the episode.
Yeah. Problem number 5,000.
I know, man. And to be honest, the quality of this isn't going to really be that good, so we might as well just go for it.
Yeah, doesn't matter, does it? Here's what it is. It's better than no podcast.
Welcome back to Ludwicks podcast. This one's a little different. This one's so different. My apologies in advance if you're listening through headphones or just streaming this from Spotify or iTunes. I am recording this audio and video through Zoom on a 2015 MacBook Pro. And it's not how I wanted to do it, but my good friend Ben Walker from the United Kingdom is joining me. And now my computer says your internet connection is unstable. We're off to a great start.
For God's sake.
So we've tried, you and I have already done this.
Yeah, we've been through the ringer with it, that is for sure.
So we did like 2 hours.
2 hours.
And here's the thing, we attempted to use all the technology that we had available to us for the first go around. And I had like everything set up. I had my podcast gear, like the podcast audio gear set up. I had my Canon Vixia G50 all set up to record video and audio separately with as good a gear as I could. You borrowed a Canon DSLR with an external microphone to record. We used Zoom as our like mediator so we could like talk back and forth to, but then we had all of our other gear outside catching like a higher quality recording. And then you sent me your video and audio files afterwards. But because it was a DSLR, it had a 30-minute recording limit. And for some reason, it was divvying up the video into like 4-minute segments. And then we had like 180 different files I had to go through. And the audio and videos were all at different frame rates. So nothing lined up and it was just a disaster. So we tried to record a second. We did record a second podcast episode that same night.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. And so this is technically our third attempt at this. And I said, forget all of this technology. I'm literally going to press screen record on Zoom and we're just going to hang out and talk. That's it.
Back to basics, I suppose.
Yeah. So all of that being said, Ben Walker, welcome back, man.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah.
Even though this feels like this is the first time, but it feels like the 5th.
Yeah, and we've been, as of last year, when the pandemic hit and all that, we've kind of spent some time kind of Zooming and doing Instagram lives, and we've kind of been doing this already. So we're just kind of used to hanging out and talking on the computer, I suppose.
Yeah, we're quite accustomed to this sort of format now, aren't we?
Yeah, it seems like
it's the only way we can hang out. So
yeah, it's better than nothing. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
As I said, when I was at my wit's end trying to figure this thing out logistically, it'd just be so much easier if I flew over there or you flew over here again, so.
Yeah, hopefully at some point this year, one of us has to be able to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Surely.
And before we recorded, we were just talking about that. Jay and Carl and the boys just set a tentative date for Players Classic in June. And Adrian has set a tentative date for Ultra Race in Poland, which was formerly racism. Not the racism that everybody's so familiar with these days, but race, RACEISM. And good on Adrian for changing the name to Ultra Race. That word is obviously becoming its own, like always has been, obviously. But having a car show called Racism exactly was, you couldn't talk to someone who didn't understand what that car show was and say, yeah, I'm so excited to go to Racism this year or something. It didn't have a good,
Doesn't sound quite right, does it?
didn't have a good ring to it, especially here in
No.
the States. So yeah, so anyway, hopefully things start to lighten up. And as we were just talking about, it doesn't seem like you guys in England are going to be opening up anytime soon.
No, our lockdowns just keep getting extended. Yeah, the government they aren't planning on letting anything up anytime soon. It's looking like at least May.
Yeah, and as we record this,
before stuff starts changing.
yeah, it's January 31st as we record this. So beginning of February. I mean, holy cow, it's crazy. And as we were just talking about before we went live, you know, having caught COVID myself, I'm torn as to, like, a full economic lockdown is not the answer. Obviously, we need to figure something else out. But we won't dive into this podcast. That's not what
That's politics.
But it's obviously the reason why we're doing this in this capacity right now, and not hanging out in person recording this, as we both would rather. So
yeah, definitely.
And so this, because of this, the way Zoom records this, we have to like be patient with each other to where when I say something, I'll just wait and then see if you've got a retort. And I'm sure it'll come with some skill to figure out how to have a proper podcast episode with Zoom, I suppose. But
yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, we'll start basically where we started on the first episode. Plug. We'll do all the plugs at the end of the episode, but basically, you and I met in person for the first time. And did we establish that it was early 2016? It was Players Classic 2016.
Yeah, it was definitely 2016 because that's the year I came over after I'd met you for H2O.
Yeah, that's right. Because my first year to England for Players Classic was 2015. So I kept thinking maybe that was the year that you and I met. But then once we talked about it, I do remember it was Players Classic 2016. I mean, we were friends on the internet, on Instagram before then. But then, yeah, we met in June 2016. And then by October of 2016, September is, yeah, when you came over for H2O.
Yep, just messaged you. Yeah, that was a weird week. That was very off the cuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to do H2O, and I'd obviously seen you. I've been on Instagram following like the car scene since the early, like 2011, 2012 sort of time, when Instagram started becoming a thing, really. And I'd always seen you lot going to like Soho, H2O, all the car shows over there. And yeah, I just wanted to come over for H2O, and I had met you at that point. So I thought I'd just ask if I could tag along.
I was all about it.
Yeah, so I just sent you a message.
Yeah, and I mean, and I was all about that anyway. It was kind of funny where I put myself in your shoes where we just briefly met. We didn't even like really hang out a ton at Players Classic. And you're like, is this something you'd be into? And I'm like, absolutely, man. Come on over, book a ticket, let's go. And and so yeah, 2016 we took my Corvair down, and yeah, and then 2017 you came back, and we took my E23, and then you came back again in 2018, and we took my Russian Lada, which I just purchased when I was over in the spring. And we can get into those stories like a little bit more in chronological order. But that's basically how we met. We met through Instagram, and then we met in person in England at Players Classic. But it wasn't until you were here for Ocean City that year that I realized, I mean, I knew you rode BMX, but it wasn't until you were here and we were just hanging out in the condo. And I realized that you had known who I was when we were both riding BMX. So that I remember that completely blowing my mind where we were talking about like Madeira or something, and you had some Madeira parts or profile parts or something. And I was like, yeah, man, I rode for Madeira for like 6 years. And you're like, yeah, I know, I had your product poster.
Yeah,
And I was like, no way. This is so crazy. Such a
yeah,
small world.
yeah. I used to watch all the Madeira edits. Um, your like the Madeira team. I had like a few favorite teams back in the day because I was more into street. So there was Madeira, Federal, Animal, and there was another one, Mosh.
Yep.
Mosh had a good team.
I haven't heard the Mosh like team or in reference to that bike company in a long time.
Yeah, there was a few like, yeah, like that was the sort of all the riders in those teams were like the people I looked up to when I was riding.
That's awesome, man. I mean, and that was a great crew. Federal, right around 2009, 2010, Federal was so awesome because Bruce Chrisman had made a comeback,
Yeah,
and he was riding for Federal for a little bit, and he kind of got out of it because he had some serious back problems, and then he got back into it, and that was before he started Facade and that whole deal. But when Bruce first came back, Federal had an awesome team. Animal obviously has always been amazing. And
always been mint.
when I look back on my years of riding, man, I'm so fortunate that I was able to like I rode in Brooklyn and New York City a ton. I mean, it's like a 5-6 hour drive from here. But having been able to meet Edwin, Vinny Salmon, Jared Washington. I mean, Jared's in the car scene. George DeSantos is in the car scene as well. Ralph Sinisi, who owns Animal, has always been into Volkswagens. All those guys were all car guys, with the exception of Edwin and a few other guys. Most of those guys were all car guys. And it was really kind of crazy to get a chance to really ride a lot with those guys and kind of become friends with them because I'm 35. I started riding in 2001. So around the early 2000s is when the animal videos really started to become huge. Like Can I Eat came
Can
out
I eat? Yeah,
03 or oh 04 maybe. And that that whole video just like changed my riding and riding in general. But
yeah,
yeah, so you had a pretty good selection of favorite teams. I mean, I'm honored that Madero was in there at all. But yeah, that's how we kind of connected those dots. I knew you were into riding, but I didn't realize you kind of knew like what I was doing with BMX during those years too.
yeah,
Kind of
yeah.
crazy.
I used to watch your edits whenever they came up on Vital or Ride. I used to always go on to Ride or Vital
Yeah,
like every day to see which edits had been uploaded or whatever.
yeah, man.
And yours were always. I remember the Rye Airfield one vividly. I think it was Rye Airfield.
I don't know. I don't know which one.
Like it was like a winter edit,
Yeah,
and you were just riding indoors,
yeah,
but there was just bar spins flying everywhere.
yeah. That was definitely normal for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then so it really, and I've mentioned this because last year was the first year I started the podcast, and Corey joined me for a lot of those episodes. And during the summer last year, we were back on our bikes. Well, I was back on my bike. Corey was on a bike, um,
yeah,
pretty aggressively, and it's honestly it all stemmed from us coming over to your place for Players Classic in 2019, and we went to a skate park near you, James Melling. It was just you and James, but you had an extra bike, and Corey and I kind of like shared that bike for the day at the skate park. And Corey grew up riding motocross, but didn't have a BMX bike, and he was kind of even before that he was kind of talking every now and then about wanting to buy a BMX bike and wanting to get into it. And after hanging out in England riding that park, he's like, I think when we get home, I think I want to buy a BMX bike. And I said, if you buy a BMX bike, like I'm gonna get back on mine. Like I know it. Like I basically stopped riding because there wasn't anyone around here to motivate me to ride. And I was sick and tired of getting hurt, and I kind of hung that part of my life up a little bit. So we got back. Corey buys a bike, and we start. He's like super ambitious. Like he's the way I was in the early 2000s, where he's like, "You want to go ride this weekend? Want to go ride this weekend?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's go." And then my itch was back like that, and so it all stemmed from hanging out with you in England, riding that skate park. So it's kind of funny that you played a factor in like rejuvenating me to get back on my bike again.
Yeah, that's amazing. You did. I couldn't believe how much you two started riding.
Me too. I couldn't
It
believe.
was like every weekend.
Yeah.
I was watching it. I'd see like your Instagram or whatever, and you'd get another like get a trick back that you'd done back in the day, and I'm just like, Jesus.
It was crazy because I stepped into it uh, with way more common sense than I'd ever had before on a bike because I'm 35. I turned 35 last March. I'm about to turn 36. And I've talked about this to the point of almost exhaustion in all the other podcast episodes, but I'd taken almost 10 years off. Like my last BMX trip was Road Fools in 2010. Like that was basically the end of my riding professionally and riding full time. So all my injuries had time to catch up to me as I got older, another decade older. So by 35, I'm pretty sore. And every time I rode my bike, I'd pull a muscle, it felt like, or so I'd be super sore. So the last couple of years, I've been like taking care of myself and working out more and stretching more. And so once I passed the threshold of getting my muscles and my joints back accustomed to riding my bike, yeah, I felt like we were off to the races. I felt like I didn't skip a beat. I just like there was a mental barrier that was built up for a lot of tricks, like getting tail whips back, getting truck drivers back, getting some of these bar spin to foot jams, getting some other tricks back were super nerve wracking. But once I finally broke that mental barrier down and just got it done, like the first tail whip I did in 10 years, I pulled it first try. But the amount of like abort runs I made up to it, I was like super scared to kick it and commit. And I learned a few new tricks last year, like tricks I had never learned before. So it was
Ice
pretty,
bars.
yeah, ice pick grind to bars, a few other like combinations, like tech combo tricks. But it was inspiring and motivating to hear guys like you messaging me, being like, "Man, it's crazy to see you back on your bike. It's motivating me to ride." So it was cool that we all kind of fed off of each other in that sense as like older dudes now.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, Now it's just finding time.
Yeah.
With me work, I work full time, trying to keep Ain't Dead Yet going, like on the side, do
Yeah.
whatever I'm doing. I've got 2 cars to build. Like, yeah, it's just finding time now for me.
Yeah. I think last year was an exceptional year. I mean, obviously, since I work for myself, it's not like I was furloughed or laid off from my job and had all this free time. I think if anything, it was a great mental escape because when you're at the skate park on your bike, you're focusing on that trick you're trying to pull. You're not focusing on bills and workflow and lack thereof of work and all that other stuff. And so, yeah, I think if anything, it was just uh, everything coming together that year specifically to kind of unload and focus on the moment more or less. So um, we'll see what happens.
BMX is always good for that anyway.
Yeah, it really is, man. It was such a huge part of my life for so long that it is a release. It is an escape. And I'll always ride my bike. Like I may not push as hard as I did this past year in, the years coming, but yeah, we regardless, the next time I come over there or the next time you come over here, bikes are coming for sure.
100%.
But speaking about Ain't Dead Yet and cars, I mean, I know the first 2 episodes that we recorded and binned, we kind of started out like, well, let's start from the beginning. But really, I really just kind of want to have this as be like just a hangout talk conversation. So
Yeah.
without going through all the painstaking details, um, to almost feel like we're regurgitating a previous conversation, uh, let's just talk about the inception of Ain't Dead Yet, your shop. What started as like an apparel brand, um, merch style brand but now has kind of manifested into an actual shop where you're producing parts and whatever. But like, how did that whole thing kind of come about? Like, what was the yeah, what was like the genesis of that?
Well, I'd always had a few ideas for clothes. I mean, we've all got our own styles. I have like a few things that I've seen that I didn't see anywhere else. Basically, I saw like one photo from years ago, and it had someone had like it was like a patch on the back, and it had a number. It had a number. I think it was a 2, and it was on like it was on a beach, and the guy had like a bomber jacket on, and on the back of the jacket was this patch, and that kind of I'd always had that in my head, and then I'd spent time with you over when I came over for H2O. That was kind of like an eye-opening thing to see someone, because obviously I knew about the Governors Club and I knew it was a brand and all that, but to see someone actually like living in it and being having it as their sort of it's a passion, isn't it, really?
That was a crazy because 2016 when you came over, that was one of the most wild TGC meets that we had in Ocean City. Like
Yeah, it was crazy.
that was the meet that we had at the convention center, and it shut the strip down. Like, and the police came in and they were like, "You guys got to get out of here! Like, the strip is clogged both ways. People are trying to come in here." And so it was kind of cool. And as a side note, that was like an exceptional year for you to come here and to have. I feel honored that played any sort of factor in your motivation, if anything, to start doing something like that. But that was a wild year for you to come here because it was just not a wild in a bad way. It was just wild as far as like volumes of people that were trying to get in for that meet, and not a single burnout. It was a very, very curated meet, and the police didn't have any issues. They were just like, you gotta disperse. Like, this is causing issues out on the strip. So it was a pretty wild meet for you to come to America for the first time, go to an iconic area, H2O, and to experience like that particular year for the TGC meet was kind of an all-encompassing year for sure.
Yeah, it was insane because the cars trying to get in were like halfway up the strip.
Yeah,
You come out of you could see, or when we left, there was still traffic
trying to
from
come in as we
trying to go in, because
yeah.
they were like it was like you went in and then you went round and then back out.
Yeah, there were two entrances. We were kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
behind the convention center on the side there, and I was almost like the captain with a sinking ship. I was the last person. The Corvair was the last car there. Like, everybody was on their way out, and there's a photo somewhere of it's like you, myself, Mike Cashman, Troy Barker from
yeah,
Australia. There's like a small group of us with like 4 or 5 Ocean City police officers on bicycles because they couldn't even come in cars. It was too gridlock. They'd come in on bicycles, and we were all just kind of hanging out. And as we cruised out, the Corvair was the last car out of there. When we got to the strip, it was still gridlock. Cars trying to come in, and there were police officers out at the strip telling people, "No, no, you can't. Everyone's coming out. No one's going in," type deal. And it was crazy. It was wild.
yeah. That was a good year. That was because I think as well, because we were in the Corvair, which is like that was the car that I associated you with
Yeah.
in the Governors Club. So to be, it was the first car like that I'd been in for a start. I'd never ever been in like a bagged rat
Yeah.
car. Like, well, rat. I hate that word.
Yeah.
Like patina. No interior. Floorboards are like this far off the floor.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, just loud. Nothing, like no windscreen wipers, chopped roof, aircraft seats. It just blew my mind.
That's awesome.
Um, so yeah, like that year, I got back and I was like, I was working at the time. I'd just been laid off from a job that I'd been doing. Well, it's where I served my time, as an apprentice. I'd been there for about 6 years. I'd just been laid off, and I got a job that I didn't enjoy. It was a decent paying job, but I was working away a lot. I didn't want to work away. I wanted to be at home doing my own thing, because since then I really wanted like a sideline to sort of do my own thing and get my own thing going. So I was working that job. I hated it. I can't remember. I can't remember the actual moment I decided to start Ain't Dead. The name actually came from a Metallica song lyric.
Yeah.
That's a fun little fact for you. And yeah, when I heard it, it was just profound in that I felt like I was trapped in working like a job that I didn't want to do. I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to do something I was passionate about. And the jobs I was doing, I wasn't passionate about. I just felt like I was wasting my life. So I thought, ain't dead yet, so I'm going to do something that I want to do.
Yep.
So I set it up, quit my job, that job that I hated, quit that, and made a good go of like the branding side of things. Did hoodies, t-shirts. This was like 2017. Yeah, because it was the year that we took the 23 down to H2O. I just set it up before I came over for H2O.
Yeah, you brought shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't that long really between my first year coming over and then the gears turning for me to get something going.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then I'd always had units. Like I've always had a unit for storing the E28 and stuff, but I'd only ever used them for putting parts on cars, like hanging out. I'd never properly utilised a unit to the extent where I'm getting jobs in, doing work and stuff. So in the last two years ish, I've been investing in machinery and getting more into the offering shop services side of things. Still doing merch and stuff on the side, but not as often as I was at the beginning. And when I do, it's just pre-order stuff. I'm not getting loads of stuff in to sell, because it's not the main focus of Ain't Dead. It's mainly the garage now.
Right.
Because that's what I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
I enjoy making things for people, getting jobs in, and making stuff work for people. And
you're a machinist by trade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trained machinist. So I was never formally trained on manual machines. I've been CNC since day one, really. But I basically, usually what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to learn on manuals,
right,
then go to CNCs. But I've kind of gone backwards. So I bought my own manual lathe and mill. I'd done a bit of manual milling in the past on a Bridgeport, but not much really in terms of setups and getting stuff perfectly set up in a miller machine to make a proper accurate cut and stuff like that.
Right.
So I basically I just watched YouTube videos on people doing stuff with miller machines, and the turning stuff just kind of came naturally because I more did CNC turning than milling. And yeah, just by having my own machines, I've kind of reverse taught myself how to machine manually.
Yep.
So it's just now it's just utilizing them to make stuff for people. That's the
Yeah,
main goal.
and that's gonna transpose from, you know, the work end into the Ain't Dead Yet shop, because you're already kind of existing in that space as a career anyway. So
Yeah, I'm currently working as a machinist, but yeah, like I say, it's all CNC.
right,
So it's kind of nice to have. I go to work and I do the CNC stuff, and then it's not like I'm going to the garage and I'm just doing what I do at work. It kind of keeps it interesting for me.
yeah,
It breaks it up, sort of thing. But it's nice to have both disciplines because a lot of people only seem to do one.
right, yeah, exactly,
Most CNC lads don't want to touch a manual lathe, and vice versa. Manual lads that just think CNCs are boring, and they are. I agree with them
yeah,
for the most part. It's just press go and wait for your part to drop out.
right, yeah, yeah. I mean, and obviously when you're doing more bespoke things out of your shop, it almost, you know, using a manual machine, it's more of a curated product. You know, you've
Yeah,
got your
yeah,
hands on it, you've got, you know, every operation of that product almost intimately. You know, it's not just zeroing the machine out and pressing go.
yeah. It's all everything's different. No parts the same.
Yeah,
They never come off the same. They've always got different little chamfers on them, or um, even with materials, like you never get the same finish on every job. It's just stuff like that. But it like you say, it makes it all more of an artisan type deal than just being production money making scheme.
right. Yeah, I'm so envious that you have a milling machine and a lathe in your shop. That is for sure. My dad had my dad had a like a I can't remember the model name, but it was like a Bridgeport Junior or whatever. It was like the smaller Bridgeport years ago, and had a lathe and had an iron worker and a few other things that he'd bought for a good price, but then didn't have the space in the shop to really set them up properly, and then he would sell them or whatever. And so we've never really had that in my father's shop. And Nick Acton up the street here, who you know, has a Bridgeport, a lathe, you know, and so whenever we need anything machined more than what we can do by hand in my father's shop, we'll go up there, and it's almost like a kid playing in a candy shop, you know, like, you know, as far as being able to use his machines and all that. So I definitely am envious of those two scores that you have in your shop for sure.
Well, you've got the space now, so
Yeah, I
you'll
mean
have to.
that space will fill up fast for sure. I mean, my shop. Yeah, and as we spoke earlier before we recorded this, like today, you know, I went on a shopping spree today to furnish that shop and bought tons of stuff to furnish that shop. But it's only like 1,000 square feet, so it's gonna fill up pretty fast. But yes, I would absolutely love a lathe and a Bridgeport milling machine in the corner of that shop space for sure. I just don't have the volume of stuff to warrant those types of purchases yet. And I still want to potentially move south. New Hampshire, I don't know if New Hampshire, I mean, I grew up here, I've always come back here, but I hate the winter, man. So the more stuff I buy up here, I realize it's gonna be more stuff that I need to transport when I finally do move. So I'm trying to show some restraint there as well, as far as buying all the toys, I suppose, before I figure out where I'm going. But as far as your shop goes, it's definitely a pretty cool setup you've got going so far.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my mates today, and I was just like, the amount of effort it will take me to move now is
Monumental.
is is insane.
Yeah.
I've got there's I've got one car that is a bare shell basically, no subframes, nothing, can't roll. I'd have to build a jig to move it. I've got a two-post lift, the lathe, the miller, and then a full shop full of tat, like car parts. I've got all of the E28 parts just strewn all over the shop. I've got like grinders, pedestal grinders, vices, like all that stuff. You don't realize when it's all set up in a space. You don't look at it and think that's a lot of stuff. You just think, what don't I have?
Right.
But then when you think about moving it all, it's like, God, I'd need a frigging lorry
Yep.
to
Yeah.
move it all.
Trips.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. Crazy.
I mean, the miller weighs. I think my mill weighs at least a ton.
Wow. 2,000 pounds. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
So Rory, so our mutual friend Rory, shout out to Rory Hamilton. Rory's
yeah,
you said he brought that in his van up to you?
that is a story. To be
Wow.
fair, yeah.
So
So
so yeah, so Rory, yeah, so Rory's the best, first of all. He's the best. And he still lives down near Bristol, that area.
yeah, yeah, it's Bristol, like Somerset sort of way.
Yeah. And he works or was working, I'm assuming still, works on Rolls-Royce aviation motors, basically.
Yeah, he's an inspector for Rolls-Royce, so he inspects all the parts
Yeah.
as they come off from the machine shops.
And that Thiel milling machine was on the floor at Rolls-Royce, right? That was in a Rolls-Royce factory.
Yeah, that was it must have just been like a tool room thing, because in terms of what Rolls-Royce do, that machine's tiny.
Yeah.
So it must have just been for doing odd jobs in Rolls-Royce. But yes, somehow Rory had it from one of his friends, I believe, had it in there, but it was from Rolls-Royce. And then I went down because my mum lives not far from where Rory lives. So when I went down to visit my mum, I just popped in to see Rory at his unit. I hadn't seen his unit, so I popped in, seen him in his Cadillac, and that mill was just sat in the corner, looking all sorry for itself. And I looked at it and I was like, I think I know how to use that. So I asked Rory if it was for sale, and he said, I'll ask my mate, as it wasn't his to sell.
Right.
So he sent me some details over. I had a look at it, left, did a bit of research on it, looked them up. And then Rory started sending me details. The guy he was including loads of tools and stuff like that. So I was like, right, well, that's good because I'll be like halfway set up. And then, yeah, he basically said, this is the price. If you want me to bring it up in the van, I will. So he somehow, I don't know how, managed to cram that miller into the back of a Sprinter van.
That's amazing.
Like an early, it might even be a 90s Sprinter van. It's the old Sprinter with the 5-pot diesel engine in it.
Yeah.
He shot that in there. He set off at like 4 a.m.
It's a long drive to your area.
That is a long drive. That's 5-6 hour drive.
Yeah. It's on the opposite,
Bristol.
like Bristol, for those
Literally is.
for those who haven't been to England, like Bristol's in the lower, like southwestern corner of England, and you're up in the northeastern part of England.
Couldn't be further away.
Yeah, so funny.
If I'd been in Scotland, I'd have been further. But in terms of going from border to border England, it's like couldn't be further away. So he set off on the morning, flew up in the van. He pulled up outside my unit. The van is like this.
Oh, I can imagine.
It had a tow hitch on the back. The tow hitch is like that far off the floor. And I'm like, as if you've drove that.
Yeah.
all the way up the M1 with a miller in the back of it. I dread to think if he'd got pulled onto a weighbridge.
Yeah, or if he'd been in an accident, that thing would have
been in an accident. Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah.
It'd have been absolutely catastrophic.
Yeah.
But We
How'd you
had a nightmare.
how'd you guys get it unloaded?
So my mate Elliot Graham knows there's a trailer shop just round the corner from our unit, and my neighbour is Elliot in his unit, and he knows the guy who owns the trailer shop.
They had a forklift.
They had a forklift, so there was me, Rory, and Elliot trying to pick this Miller up out of the back of the van. We're trying to pick the Miller up enough that we can get it out of the. It was like this far off not going in the door of the van because it's tall. So we're trying to pick it up, but pick it up enough that we can get out the door, but not hit the door. And it starts coming out, and we're like having to shimmy stuff around, and we're having to pick it up and then shift something and then go back under it and pick it up again. And it literally must have took about an hour and a half just to get out the van.
Yeah.
But it was we got it out in the end, and it was
It seems so in fashion with Rory, like a whole ordeal like that. Seems like Rory would be involved in some way or another.
Yeah. He loves anything like that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, we hadn't talked about that whole trip because, and we'll talk about like our mutual endeavor with the YouTube stuff. But it's funny because when you talk about, you do a little shop tour on one of your episodes, you're talking about the lathe. I mean, not the lathe, but the Miller, and you're talking about how you make a few little key points. You're like, my mate Rory had this, or I got it, facilitated it through Rory. It was in the Rolls Royce factory, and he brought it up in his van, and that was it. Like, in passing, and the whole time I'm thinking, there's a whole story that you just right over the top of. Like that giant Miller in the back of a van, like, is a story because those things are not light. They're not easy to move. And Rory doesn't live anywhere near you.
No.
So that's hilarious.
He also runs that van on what's it called? Biodiesel.
Yeah.
So Rory brews his own biodiesel. He's got his own plant.
Yeah.
Because it's Rory, right?
Yeah, exactly. As you do when you're
Rory. As you do. So he not only did he have the Miller in the back of the van. I'm not trying to get him into trouble here. This is for effect.
Yeah, he's got the
not only did he have the Miller, he had like a massive, I don't even know what they're called. It's like a Bowser for holding his biodiesel.
Right.
In the back of the Sprinter. That God knows what that weighs.
Right.
That'll have been full of diesel. So he has a ton's worth of Miller behind probably a ton's worth of diesel.
Yep.
Just sat in a massive container. So if anything would happen, if the Miller fell on that container, where's the diesel going?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And you and I both know what Rory looks like driving this rig. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you see the video of him shifting with his foot?
No.
You need to see that video.
Oh,
I think his girlfriend Pip filmed him, and he's like, I think he's holding her hand. So it's like middle of summer, so he's in shorts, flip flops, just t-shirt, like typical Rory. And he's driving down the motorway. He must be sat at like 60, 70 mile an hour on the motorway. And he needs to change gear. So his hand's holding Pip's hand. So he just, without even pushing the clutch in, he just comes off the throttle, puts it into gear with his foot, like brings his foot up with a flip flop on, pushes the shift lever back and changes gear, like rev matches changing gear.
Yeah, he synchro shifts with just
synchro shifts it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
With his foot in flip flops.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
It's an amazing video. I'll have to show you that.
It's Rory. Like that's just
Rory. Yeah.
Rory.
He's hilarious.
Yeah, man, he needs to come over here too.
Has he ever been?
I don't think so. Not to
No.
hang out with me. I don't know if he's ever made a trip to America with like his family or anything. I can't remember. I feel like we've talked about that, but he hasn't made a trip over for like car show stuff with me on the East Coast. So we need to change that once everything's kind of back to normal.
You didn't come the year he came to Worthesy, did you?
No, that was the year after. It was 2019 when Dean brought the Continental.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the last time I went as well.
I was yeah, it's the last year anyone went, really. Really? Or did
Yeah,
anyone
well,
go?
yeah, it is. Yeah, what mine about?
Um, I was planning on coming that year, 2019, but I had hopes. Can't remember if it was Altrace in Poland or if it was Japan in the fall. I had some aspirations for some other international travel, and I'd done Worthersy in 2018, which we'll talk a little bit about. But I don't remember why I didn't do it. It was because I was going to save that time and money to do something else. And then I didn't end up doing Japan in the fall because I ended up facilitating driving the E23 coast to coast in America to sell it and then fly to Seattle and drive the Century home. And that took up like 3 weeks worth of being on the road. And so that was kind of like the last trip of 2019. Well, I take that back. The last trip of 2019 was spending 2.5 weeks in Florida for Simply Clean and Turkey Rod Run with the
Yeah.
air. But that basically, yeah, I really, really wanted to do Worthesy in 2019 with that whole crew again because it was just such an incredible time the first go.
Yeah, 2019 was good. Like we did enjoy it, but 2018 was just something else. I don't know if it was because it was the first year that we all went or what,
Yeah,
but
yeah. We
yeah,
talked about so like Corey and I did an episode a couple episodes ago about the Worthesy trip. So we have recently talked about that trip mostly in detail, and we
yeah,
did kind of skim over the hellish beginning to your part of that trip and having to having to go get Frank at the airport, who had flown over from here in the US, and then backtrack and then hit the road. We'd already headed off to Germany. We were all going to meet in Cologne, Germany. This is 2018. And we headed out. Then you guys hit the road and then had issues with all your wheels because you had bolts coming undone and leaks everywhere. And then you had to like basically rebuild all your wheels on the side of the road.
yeah, it was rough.
Before you even got to Dover, before you even get to the
Yeah,
south of England to even get on the Eurotunnel into France.
we hadn't even got out of the north. We were
Unreal.
still, we were like an hour and a half. So we had to go north to pick Frank up. So that was an hour north anyway.
You had a
And then,
Newcastle, right?
yeah, Newcastle.
Yeah.
And then we were probably, for those that know England, we were probably near Wetherby, which is like kind of on the way to Leeds. And it was on the M1. And yeah, started with one wheel just totally lost all air on the M1. So we had to stop, take the wheel off, put the spare on the side of the M1, and it was the driver's side. So I had wagons going past me at 60 mile an hour while I'm trying to change a wheel. And yeah, like we could do a full podcast on that story,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
literally, because it was just absolutely pandemonium.
But you got to sort it out. You got them rebuilt.
Yep. Eventually, we had to build them. We eventually got the car into a pub car park down to probably like 3 hours away. We managed to limp that far down on the spare. Got it into a pub car park. That was a whole scenario, just getting to the car park. And then when we did, we had to rebuild the wheels, put new bolts and nuts on every single bolt on every wheel.
So this was so to kind of catch people up to speed. You are in your E28,
E28
yeah, your black E28, and you had 3-piece compomotives on it at the time,
CX 600s, I think they are called.
and the
Yeah,
bolts, the hardware holding the faces and lips and barrels together, were just like a bolt that just had failed, like uniformly. had had failed.
Yeah, they were just they weren't high tensile, or they were high tensile, but there's a certain grade of high tensile that you're supposed to use for wheel bolts,
Right. Yeah.
because they've got like a shear. I think it's a shear, um, whatever it's called, shear capacity or something.
Yep.
So they were like high tensile in that they were hard, but they were too hard, so they were brittle.
Right.
So any impact and they just sheared off.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just started. All the wheel bolts started snapping off the faces. So as soon as a wheel bolt snapped, the seal inside the rim split, and then all your tires lost all pressure.
Right.
So yeah, we ended up just we found like a hardware shop near where the car park was, and I had to get a taxi to get to the shop to get the nuts and bolts. The nuts and bolts cost like a tenner for all of them to fit the wheels.
Yeah.
Um, so we had to build them all. Me, Frank, and Tom sat in a car park with the wheels off the car, rebuilding. Like just sat there with us. We didn't have impact tools or anything like that. We literally had spanners and ratchets. That was it. So we just sat there like tightening all these wheel bolts up.
All the while, you were supposed to be on the Euro train, heading into France. We were already clear across Belgium at that point, and had gotten into Germany. And the plan was we got into Germany the night before the following night that we were going to be driving through the night down on through the Alps to South Austria. And so Cologne, Germany at Marcel's house was going to be the rendezvous point. And once you guys hit trouble, we knew that we would just wait up for you guys the next day. Your your whole wrench in the gears cost you a full day. You guys ended up staying and caught the train the next day, the next morning, and hammered clear across France, Belgium, the Netherlands, into Cologne. And you guys literally showed up right after we ate dinner, and Jules and Eugene and Paul and everyone else like met up at Marcel's, and we're all ready to hammer another 12 hours through the night to Austria, and we're waiting on you guys. And you guys pull up to Marcel's, beep beep, and we're like, "Hi, this is Ben, this is Tom, this is Frank." Everyone's like, "Yep, hi, 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 ciao, here we go." And you guys just kind of kept on driving. So, oh my gosh, the drive down for you guys was just like one full like 24-hour haul.
It was literally 24 hours
Yep.
because
And
we left. It might have been more. It might have been more like 25, 26.
probably.
Because we left Folkestone. That's where the tunnel is in England. We left Folkestone at about 9, and then we got to France. Forgot that clocks go back an hour.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, clocks go forwards an
Goes
hour.
forward an hour. Yeah, yeah, you lose an hour.
Yeah, we lost an hour. So we're like, we're in France now. I think we were 4 hours away from where you were in Cologne. So we had to basically just get like, as soon as we got there, we were like, right, shit, we're gonna have to just haul straight there, like flat out. I think we stopped twice for fuel and to go to the toilet. That was it.
Yep. Just hammer.
Just hammered. Yeah, we hammered straight to Cologne, and then got to Cologne, and we were literally stood. We didn't even sit down. We were stood talking and meeting everybody for 20 minutes.
I'm looking at the photos right now because I was curious what time you guys showed up. So I've got video and photos. You won't be able to see it, but I've got photos of us
Yeah.
hanging around waiting for you. Like that's Jules's car at Marcel's. That's Dean, Corey, Marcel, and I around Jules's 100, and that is 7:42 p.m. Like it was almost 8 p.m. and you guys had either just showed up or we were still waiting on you guys.
Yeah.
And because I remember it was dusk, you guys showed up and we just hit the road.
Yeah,
So
it was
wild.
literally like, show up, hi, right, back in your car, 12 hours, straight to Austria, through the night.
Yeah, pretty wild stuff.
Yeah,
And I
it
mean,
was it.
I mean, dude, we're all cut from the same cloth. I mean, this stuff, like during those moments, it can be super stressful. It can be super draining, taxing, exhausting, frustrating, whatever, fill in the blank. Like it can be, I don't want to be here right now. But when now that we're almost 3 years later and we're talking about it, it's like I'd give anything to be
Anything.
at that Munich McDonald's as the sun's coming up, and when we met up with Phil Giebler and Ollie and all the other Germany boys, and we went, and I talked about this on the last episode talking about the Worthsey trip. We went into that McDonald's under the cover of darkness, and I'd never been to this part of Germany before, and when we walked out, it was dawn. The sun wasn't up yet, but you could see, and we came out the front doors of that McDonald's, and it was the Alps. It was just like I was literally like mind blown, like speechless. I couldn't believe we were in this fake looking painting. It didn't even look real. And so I'd give anything to be on that trip again, no matter how taxing and tiring it was. I mean, the day prior, Johnny Smith had driven us to Kettering. I think that was the name of the town. Literally driven us 2.5 hours from Cy Gray's place so I could go impulse buy the Lada, and then left it at the Russian man's house, and then we headed off into Germany. And it wasn't until we were in France that I heard word that Simon, Dean's buddy, had gone and actually collected the Lada. And so here I am, we're in Munich, and I'm like down a few $1,000s. I just bought a car that I'm gonna have to figure out how to ship to America when I get home. And I'm self-employed. I don't know what I'm gonna come home to for work. And we're headed down to Worthsey for a full week, and then we had a full week in Germany and Poland lined up after that. It was just like we're flying by the seat of our pants, man. We were literally just living life.
I honest. Me and Tom talk about it all the time. That trip,
It's the
because
best,
it was the best trip.
dude. Oh my gosh, I'm so stoked we were all there for that. You know what I mean? Like Marcel, Jules, Eugen, Corey, Frank, me, you, Tom. Like we were representing the USA, England, the Netherlands, Germany, Austria. Like we were we were just, it was all a bunch of these kids that just met each other on the internet, and we're all in the slammed cars, and we're all driving old vintage slammed cars clear across Europe, like down to the south of Austria, and really not a care in the world. We're just sending it. And man, that's what life is, man. Like
That was the most, because at the time I wasn't working. I was kind of floating along on savings at the time, so it wasn't an issue for me to do. It was an issue for me to do Worthsey because I didn't know. I don't have like an unlimited amount of money, so I knew if it cost a lot of money, I was going to be in trouble when I got back. But at the same time, it was like I didn't have to worry about getting home to go to work I didn't need to get home. Do you know what I mean?
right.
So it was so, yeah, it was just total freedom being in that car. Like that's my, for those that don't know, the E28 is my like keeper car.
Yeah.
So to be in that car with all my friends, like Americans, the Germans, who ended up, they're now really close friends. I didn't know them at the time,
Yeah.
but there was like you, Corey, Frank, Tom, who I've known Tom for years. I shared a unit with him. Like, yeah, it was the best year.
And then we get down into Austria, and now we're hanging out with all of our friends. So the Keen boys,
Yeah.
Andy was down there, and Andy and Kenny and Kevin, their social media guy, they're in from Belgium. Victor from Moscow, Russia was there. He drove his E38 there he'd driven down from England, but he'd driven the E38 from Russia to England to get all the work done. And then he drove it down. And then from Austria, he headed back to Moscow, Russia. I mean, all the Switzerland boys were there. Hoppe was down from Finland. I mean, it's incredible. It was just an incredible trip. That's why I wish
weather was amazing.
Weather was unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
It rained the day after we left, it was rain all the way through the next week that everybody showed up for the actual show. Like we were there in the perfect, it like sprinkled like one morning while we were down there. Yeah.
Amazing.
And then, yeah, so it's, yeah, I mean, I fully plan on doing other trips like that, if not that same trip in the future, once this whole COVID thing kind of not necessarily goes away, but becomes a part of like regular life or whatever, when we can travel again and all that stuff. But like that's, man, that's woven into the fiber of my being. Like, I mean, we were just talking about me going to get the new shop van. Like, I flew on a moment's notice down to Georgia to pick this van up and drove 20 hours home in one day alone in one sitting. Like, I like being on the road. I like I like the spice of life, I guess. Like not sitting in a cubicle or just having to exist with the same variables day in and day out. It's like, heaven forbid I get some sort of like news from a doctor 10 years from now that makes me wish I had spent my 20s and 30s just, I mean, being smart. I'm not wasting all my money, but you best believe when I have a couple good weeks with the laser gig or whatever, it's very tempting to just shut the lights off and bail out for a week or more to just get some ground under me, and go see something new.
Yeah, I feel the same. Like traveling, even when I just leave my area, it's such a you get such a it's like freedom, but it's like it's a sensation of freedom. It's
It's
not
in
like the thing of freedom. It's like it's a feeling you get.
it's I think it's freedom at its core level. Like
Purest, yeah.
when in November, this past November, when I flew to Los Angeles on the West Coast and drove that Nissan Q45 clear across America with my good friend Alex and Marlene. I remember well, at numerous times I felt this, but I posted an Instagram story and kind of conveyed it. But we were in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, middle of nowhere. I mean, we were between Phoenix and the Arizona New Mexico border. So we were beyond a little town called Payson. We're on the middle, like literally nowhere, like high desert, just flat as the eye can see, cactuses, middle of nowhere. And we're coming up on dusk and it's like sunset. Alex and Marlene are in their Forerunner and I'm in the Q45 alone at this point. And it's a plushy V8 luxury car from the 90s. I've got the cruise control set, I got some music playing, and sunset for the, we were driving like northeast, so sunset's kind of over my left shoulder. And every now and then I look out the driver's window and I'm seeing this desert sunset out in the middle of nowhere, and it's just the two of us driving. And you just feel so free. Like, and I posted that. I posted like I was listening to a band called Moving Mountains, and they're one of my favorite like atmospheric indie rock bands. Like they're very like instrumental, big sounding. Like it fits. Their music fits to the scene, like the scenery that I was kind of engulfed in at that moment. And I posted that as an Instagram story, panning from the sunset across the Arizona landscape out my windshield at this wide open road that you see in American movies, and all I put for text on that story was free. That was it. Like that's in that moment, I couldn't have been more free. It was just, yeah, it's like this euphoric feeling that you can't really put into words, I guess. But
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Euphoric.
that's a feeling that I think we all, I mean, me specifically, like I chase wholeheartedly. It's a scary addiction because it gets expensive, but what we've gone through in this past year, having been forced to not only stay in our area, but definitely our country, it kind of brings you back down to earth. You're like, all right, I got to make sure I'm like paying my bills and saving money and all this stuff too. But giddy up when the borders open. Holy cow, I'm going to get me on that plane. I'm coming over there.
I can't wait.
Me
Really
neither,
can't wait.
man. Me neither.
It's been
I've got the cure. I've got the cure. I've had COVID. I've got the antibodies. Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah, this year's been, well, yeah, literally it's like near enough a year now since we got locked down the first time.
Yeah, yeah. It was March.
Yeah,
It was mid-March here in the States because Corey and I were in Chattanooga, Tennessee, with the Governor's Club booth with the Corvair uh, vending Riverside. And the
yeah,
day before the show, Chattanooga and most other American cities shut all gatherings of 250 people or more down because this was the beginning of cases starting to show up in American cities, and people not knowing what else to do started shutting any events down that just had large groups of people. And so, yeah, that was mid-March because I was down there for my birthday on March 8th. And yeah, so we're coming up on a year of this full lockdown thing.
yeah. It's kind of been good in a way for me because I wouldn't say good, but it's like forced me to. I haven't had distractions, is how I would describe it. Um, Obviously, life's just stopped. So all I can do is what I've been doing. All I can focus on really is Ain't Dead. So this year has been, well, this is the year that I bought the lathe. I think, and I had the miller last year. I bought the lathe this year, and in terms of like pushing my own services and my skills on the machines and stuff like that, and with the cars as well, like I've learned to weld sheet metal on cars, which is a totally different thing to welding.
Yep.
If you've ever welded cars, you know exactly what I mean.
Dude, well, yeah, and on a higher, deeper, or more scary level. I mean, for goodness sake, when my dad and I chopped the roof on the Corvair, we're welding rusty air.
Yeah,
Like the roof, like when we're plug welding and we're using giant copper blocking to dissipate heat to keep the metal from warping and doing
yeah,
whatever it wants to do when you're welding it. Like, yeah, welding rusty sheet metal together. Holy cow. I got a real quick learning lesson 101 on yeah, welding air. And my dad, like, I mean, I know you've met my dad, but holy cow, like my dad doesn't talk the talk. He just walks the walk. He goes in there and he's like, I think I can weld air. And he goes in there and somehow figures it out. But yeah, I mean, you're right though. Like last year, although, Corey and I spent a lot of time on our bikes, we spent a lot of time in Boston and around New England riding our bikes. And I did do the trip from LA over, but that was basically because of cabin fever at the end of the year. But it was a forced downtime to focus on our endeavors. Like
yeah,
I would have traveled to Europe probably twice. So as I have been the last 6 years in a row now, it's just been a part of my annual uh,
adventure.
therapy was to come over to Europe at least a few times a year, and that costs money. Just airfare is $1,000, and then if you buy a car, as I started doing while I'm over there, now you're in your trip for a few $1,000s easily. But yeah, it was a forced downtime. It was a forced focus. That's why I now have, well, I went through a couple tow rigs, but it's like I pulled the trigger on the shop space. I pulled the trigger on rebranding everything in the Ludwig's garage. I'm like more orientated on, yeah, the business, really. I still suffer from wanderlust as I have in years prior and always have, and always will.
Yeah,
But you're right. It was a forced, like, time to focus type year.
yeah, 100%. That was because I've still wanted to travel. Like I still wanted to do Worthsea last year. Me and Tom Caffrey, who came in 2018, were going to take his E24 over because he'd just rebuilt it. But obviously, when COVID hit, we couldn't. So I was gutted about that. But at the same time, like, yeah, it's just helped. It's helped me have to focus. Like I've had to just be doing what I'm doing with Ain't Dead, and that's it. That's all I've got. So
Right. Yeah.
it's yeah, it's definitely been, this past year has definitely been the most focused I've ever been on anything. So
Yeah,
in
that's
that
good.
respect, I am grateful for it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the circumstances around it are the worst, but if we ever needed something to like put the brakes on and focus on our foundation, sort of say like working on the foundation, this was it for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
That's basically what it's done. It's just totally streamlined everything. It's just pointed my entire direction towards that. So hopefully, when we come out of this, I can utilize the sort of the base I've got now with Ain't Dead, and yeah, just keep pushing it
Yep. Yep. That's awesome.
by bringing it to more play. Like I didn't even get to drive the Corvair anyway last year. Like nobody saw that car.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing. Like that's the way I feel about the Century. I mean, I'm super grateful that I was able to get the car down to Ocean City, Maryland, which very well may have been the last year that even I do that, which is crazy and a totally different story or another story. But to have had that car down in Ocean City and then on to Chattanooga for Riverside at the end of 2020 was like the solace of the year, because much like you and your Corvair, I'd searched the world over for that car for years and then finished modifying it over the winter, and then coming into spring it's like, well, cool your jets, pandemic time, you're not doing anything this year. And so with your Corvair, to get anyone who doesn't know up to speed, the Chevrolet Corvair was not available in Europe. That was an American market and some Australian. They sent some to Australia too. So they did make some right-hand drive variant Corvairs, which is amazing. And I've always wanted to try. The Corvairs would be, I say, easy enough. The Corvair would be easy enough to right-hand drive convert because you don't have to worry about a motor up front, and having to deal with moving your brake and steering column, your brake system and steering column and all that, and making a steering rack, all that stuff. But I've always thought it'd be kind of cool to try to find like an Australian Corvair that was right-hand drive, or get like a dash and stuff shipped over. But anyway, the Corvairs weren't available in Europe or England. And you were able to find an early model. Mine's a late model, but you were able to find an early model, which is a completely different body style Corvair that had just been imported from California of all places. So it's rot free, has a cool patina, and yours is, yeah, it's a 4-door, early model 4-door, and yeah, that was kind of, as we've already talked about, that was kind of the first car that you really kind of dove into on a deep level as far as fabrication goes.
Yeah, like I said, I wasn't looking for the Corvette. Just kind of it appeared. I wanted an old American car, and I wanted something with patina because I wanted to. Yeah, I wanted to delve into fabricating a subframe, like fitting bags, doing the whole sort of properly building a car. So that came up, and it was the right price. Um, I knew you had one, so I had like I knew I could go to you if I was stuck with parts or if I needed help with the fabrication on the bags or whatever. So it made sense, but I really didn't. I wanted something that was bigger. I wanted like a typical sort of 60s American big body coupe, really. Something something a bit more, yeah, just big. I just wanted a big American car.
Yeah, it was
Because
funny.
they're so crazy over here. Like they just look insane on our roads.
Yeah, yeah. You messaged me when you found the Corvair. You're like, you have no idea what I just found, like close by to me too. And yeah, it worked out because even though yours is an early model and a completely different body than mine, they shared the same suspension, with the exception of your rear was a swing arm, and then my rear was an independent rear end. But for the most part, front subframes are the same. Rear end is basically similar, and yeah, so it was really cool. Both Corey and I helped, getting you parts for it, and yeah, any sort of like tech advice or questions. I by the grace of God, I had a duplicate full blown shop manual for that car that I gave you, that I'm sure you've been able to refer to. I mean, you were talking about having to tune your carburetors, and here you go, you've got a book that goes through those Rochester carburetors and tells you exactly how to tune them and go through them.
Yeah, I had to use I've used that book for rebuilding the front spindles. I had to like get the torque right for the bearings, and I used it for setting the valve lash on the engine,
Yep.
because the valve lash was that ended up I had a nightmare getting it to run properly, and it ended up being the valve lash. So I had to go back through the book and follow it step by step, because you go on the internet and you get like 5 different answers on how to do it. So if you've got a book from the time, you're just gonna all you have to do is go off what the book says, and it's perfect now. It runs absolutely mint.
That's awesome. Yeah, and having that like that literature is almost invaluable at that point
Oh
because
yeah,
it's your source. It's what you go to get any questions answered.
yeah. I was very when you brought that over, I was like, that is going to be so helpful. I was proper grateful for it.
I actually forgot. Yeah, until you just mentioned it, I forgot that I actually brought that with me
Yep,
over in 2019 when we came over. Yeah.
you
Oh,
brought that and a Corvair early model. What was it? It was like
brochure.
a brochure.
It was like a yeah, it was a brochure when they were a new car.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah, because I've had people send me all sorts of Corvair stuff over the years, since I've had mine since 2013. So I've got a lot of duplicate Corvair stuff, but also some early model stuff that doesn't apply to my late model. So once you got an early model, I was like, yeah, I got some stuff. I got some extra
Yeah.
stuff. I gave you that rear grill.
Yes. Yeah. That was the last time I was over there.
Yeah, your Corvair didn't have the rear valence grill.
Nope.
And when I bought my Corvair, it came with a Ford van filled to the gills, right to the roof of Corvair parts, like interiors, a couple extra motors. Well, not full motors, but blocks, some heads, all that stuff. And in there was some early model stuff, and there were some late model valence grills, and then some early model ones. And I think you were actually here when you were talking about how yours didn't have one, and I was like, dude, I got one in the shed. You can have it. It's
Yeah.
perfect.
We literally went out to the shed. I looked at it and I looked at it and I thought it looks the right size.
Yeah.
So I ended up. Did we box it? Did we even wrap that up?
I think you just carried it on the plane.
I'm pretty sure I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like turned up at the desk and I was like, I've got this. They were like, yeah, just put it through as a bag. So I put it through as a bag and then just got on the plane and put it in the overhead
Yep.
lockers,
Amazing.
and that was it. So it would have cost me a fortune to ship that over.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just had it in my hand and yeah,
And
got off the
early
plane
model,
with this piece of steel. Like
yeah, yeah. And
I thought that one.
it was an early model grill. So as far as I know, it should have been a perfect fit on your car.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Awesome.
As soon as I got back, I put it on.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's still on now, and I gave it a polish. It
Yeah.
was quite it was covered in like typical Corvair
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
exhaust oil. So I gave it a good polish and fitted it up, and yeah, it's been on ever since.
Perfect.
It's perfect.
Yeah, there's a few other 60s American cars I've got my eye on right now, and I've got to finish a few other projects first, obviously. And ideally, getting rid of the Corvair would open up the space, time, and money to do another 60s American build, but I think it'd be too difficult to get rid of that car. I think that car, uh, I don't know. I've always been torn. My dad's not torn. My dad's like, if you have an opportunity to sell that thing, you sell it. But it's been an inner battle with me where I'm like, I don't know. I think that and the 700 are like the keeper cars unless I hit serious tough times.
Yeah, I think the Corvair's kind of it's like your trademark.
Inadvertently, because
Yeah,
I wasn't looking for one when I found it. I had always talked with my dad about how cool a late model Corvair would look with a roof chop and body dropped. That was one of the cars where I was like, boy, one of those things would look amazing. I'd never seen a body dropped late model panned out. I'd never seen one panned out. I'd seen them lowered. I'd seen a couple with roof chops, but they were done weird. They didn't lengthened. They weren't done as a traditional roof chop. They weren't like lengthened and like widened to match the factory angles of the pillars. They basically left the roof the same dimensions and then brought it down and angled the pillars in. But then that changes the whole aesthetic
Right.
look of the car. So I hadn't seen a late model Corvair with a traditional roof chop, but I definitely had never seen one with a traditional roof chop and body dropped on air. So when I found it on Craigslist, I was just bored one night looking on Craigslist and found it. I went and looked at it and I thought it was way too crusty to save. But then I got under it and realized it had been sitting on the pavement for like 40 years and it was pretty solid under it. Now, I'm going to do a YouTube video about this whole thing, so I'll skim over this. But like when I saw how solid it was, that's when I called my dad and I was like, I think I'm pulling the trigger on this Corvair. And I think I found the one that we're going to body drop and cut the roof off of, not actually thinking that we were going to go through with it. And sure enough, within a month, we were cutting the roof off the stupid thing, not knowing what we were going to do to put it back on in the right way. So, yeah. So anyway, it was really cool to see that you bought a Corvair and kind of dove down, uncharted territory for you, on that car. So,
Yeah, it was totally to push my abilities and try and build a car that you can't just go out and buy parts for.
right.
Like, there's a few bits on that I've had to, not just the suspension, like stuff I've made for it that you just can't get here, like
Right.
bushes for certain. Like there's a bush for the steering rack, that instead of ordering one, I just made one, like turned one up on the lathe. So stuff like that, it's like really, yeah, it's been very good in it's pushed me to push myself really in terms of building a car.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And like you were saying before, that car might not be your end all car. You'll end up moving that car on, but hopefully you'll be able to bring it out to more shows in your area or in Europe in general in 2021, this upcoming year. So you get a chance to kind of, it's going to be the rolling billboard for Ain't Dead Yet, for your shop. Just like all of my cars I've had or put together in the last 10 years have ultimately been a rolling billboard for anything that I'm doing. So even if you do end up selling it, it'll be awesome to like see that car parked up at Players Classic with a bunch of other cars from the area.
Yeah, I just want to enjoy it a bit. I want to get out in it and show it. I want to see people's reactions to it, and yeah, just get to enjoy it before I will. I think I will end up selling it, just because it's. I want to move into. I want to liquidate it and move into something else, like the next step.
Right.
I don't want to stay like just in one place with one car, apart from the E28.
Right.
But yeah, that'll basically go towards another project, and it'll be better than the last, and hopefully I just keep continuing
Yeah.
to up the stakes every time.
That's the overall goal, man. I mean, that's how my life has been inadvertently. You finish a project and money doesn't grow on trees. So when you either get the inclination to start a different project or you actually find a specific one for sale, you're
Yeah,
like, well, I guess I'll sell this one to fund the next one. And then the next one, you put more of that skill set, the new skill set, the new everything that you've learned on that past project, go into this next project and either expedites that project or makes it a better project all encompassing. And then you sell that one, you move on, and it's just you're climbing this ladder. Maybe not financially, maybe not you're just continuing to make more and more money on each project, but you're growing, in your trade. And that's something that I try to, even if I'm not selling a car for everything that I want to make on it, I look at the journey with the car and like the things I've learned along the way, and that's worth something in itself.
yeah. Like I say, the Corvair taught me a lot. I basically learned to TIG weld building that car. I TIG welded the whole front subframe and all the arms and stuff. So that was the main skill set that I took from building that car. As well as I had to do a bit of engine. I had to do a lot of wiring because a lot of the wiring in the engine bay was toast, absolutely just dry, rotten.
Yeah.
So I had to do a lot of wiring, like starter wiring, ignition wiring. I had to figure out it had a Petronics unit in it. I had to figure that out. Points condenser, I had to figure that out because I had to get rid of the Petronics because the car didn't like it. It had a really bad misfire because of it. So yeah, it taught me like it almost took me back to basics um, with the engine because the engine's so simple. It kind of it made me definitely learn a lot of simple things, but then at the same time I had to learn how to TIG weld to make the car what it is.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely worth taking the risk of buying it and um, building it. Really, it took 2 years to build.
And really, the only next step you have is to get it out to one, enjoy it at shows and whatever, and second, to get it in front of more people that can see it and ultimately possibly find a future buyer for the car, and then, as we were saying, move on to the next project and keep on going. I mean, that's literally the next step for my venture, is to look at what I've been doing for the last 10 years as more of a business plan, like to do more of these. I mean, and my car ADD, so it were, or so it is
Yeah,
is the way I naturally want to do it. Like, not because of trying to make money or looking at it as a business. My car ADD, like if I were to indulge or entertain my car ADD, it is literally buy this car, do it the way I like it, enjoy it for like a couple weeks. Well, that's good enough. Sell it. Let's get on to this next one. Like, so it's it's really it's really like best case scenario, because I am I am playing into and indulging this urge to like just keep being a revolving door of cars. But if I'm making money while doing it, it's fulfilling a career and a job basically. And what more could you ask for? You know,
it's what you're doing anyway, so you may as well make a business out of it. And
that's kind of that's what I tell myself as like my own vote of confidence. Because when I look at it as like a business, that's when I start to second guess my myself, or my confidence starts to kind of come down. I'm like, ugh, now I got to make sure I make money. Can I buy this for the right price? Can I sell it for that? Like, what am I going to have for overhead in it? Is my profit margin going to be too tight? I start looking at all this stuff. And then I realize in years prior, I didn't worry about any of that stuff. I just went off of instinct. I'm like, I want that. I can make that something cool in my eyes, not to like show it off to anyone else. I'm like, I want to make that cool so I think it's cool. And then someone goes, "Hey, you want to sell that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, maybe." And then in some cases, they're like, "I'll give you X," and I'm like, "Giddy up,
yeah,
let's go." So
I'll
yeah,
drive it across country and you can buy it.
exactly. Make a cool trip out of it and get a chance to
Yeah,
sell it. And yeah, I mean, I think anyone, and I've said this time and time again, I think anyone who is a true artisan or artist, or I don't know, someone who's an artist in any at any core level, is their own worst critic in some fashion. And that in itself continues to feed the flame of motivation and growth. And so I think, even though I start to second guess myself, like, "Ugh, should I be investing in this part of the business? Should I really dive into this?" But that uncertainty almost flips itself on its head and becomes the flame for the motivation to just make sure it's receiving all of my focus and my determination. So it kind of, it's this double-edged sword where you think it's killing you, but then you're like, wait, I think this is actually fueling the fire, and I think it's working. So I think it's something that we'll always suffer from. We'll always think it's pulling us under the water and drowning us, but in the same way, that fight to stay above the water is the climbing the ladder that we're trying to climb.
yeah. I mean, I personally don't want to get to a point where I'm like, right, I can do nothing now.
Complacent. I mean,
Complacent.
that's
I want to get
complacency.
to a point where I'm just sat there like
Yeah. And man,
just doing stuff.
I think complacency is the most terrifying thing ever, for someone like us. I mean, when you finally content is different, but I look at complacency as that's good enough. And
Yeah.
that's almost like the end of the ride. Like I've done enough, let's just ride this out now. I don't think we're I don't think we're woven with that. I think it'll always be a challenge, not to be better than anyone else or in competition with anyone else. I think it's only the spark to continue growing for ourselves.
I just want to get better at building cars, making things with machines,
Yep.
selling clothes, like doing YouTube videos, road trips. That's all I want.
Yep.
So as long as I'm doing that,
And I mean, and that's a good spot to wrap it up on. And being on the whole subject matter of chasing your dreams, pursuing happiness in the same avenue of chasing your dreams, doing what it takes to just step out of your comfort zone or maybe step away from the safety net and invest or take the plunge, make the leap of faith, whatever, fill in the blank basically, to start turning the wheels towards what you really want to do, and I mean, obviously figuring that out first is the first step, is trying to figure out what it is you really want to do. And I myself can attest that that's a pretty difficult thing. Big part of me wants to sit in a studio and write music. And if I could get paid to do that, to write movie scores or to write music for, whatever, like that's a dream job for me. But that requires like all the time in the world. So I would have to focus on just that. So it's yeah, I'm always trying to figure out where my focus needs to lie. But once you've got that figured out, it's having the confidence and dedication to just make it happen. And you're doing it too with Ain't Dead Yet. And you're in a great position where you still have a full-time job, so you can hustle in your off hours with a budget. Like for me or for anyone else that was in my shoes where we got laid off, and at that point it was all right, let's chase our dreams. It's a little bit harder at the get-go where you're like, ugh, like this isn't paying me any money, and now it's like stunting the growth of this thing. But anyone that's listening to this that's in your shoes where but we've also, you and I've also talked about this time and time again when we've had our own conversations, the time you have to sacrifice for being at your job is also a hindrance, so it's this double-edged sword where you might be funding your side gig with your job, but you're also your hands are tied because you've got to go to that job and spend that time doing that.
yeah, if you've got a day job, it's like you say, it's a safety net, but at the same time, I don't have the free time to make stuff happen all the time. Like if someone's selling a car and I need to go and pick that car up now, and I'm at work till 4, I can't leave. I can't go and get that car. Someone who is in a shop working for themselves can just go out and buy it, and they've got it before I have.
Yeah, and that comes with its own set of advantages. Obviously, I mean that's what I did last week. Friday night, I got a call on an offer that I put in on that van, and I booked a flight, and I left my house at 3:30 in the morning the next morning for the airport. And by the end of that day, was driving the thing home. So I mean, it is a set of advantages in that light. Yeah, I mean, they all come with their own advantages and disadvantages, and once you find that avenue where you're kind of can support the business doing what you're doing, then that's when you can kind of make that shift and go all in. And it's scary, man. I live with it every day. It's super scary, but it's incredibly rewarding. Holy cow, is it rewarding. I mean, there's more lows than there are highs, that's for sure. But when there's highs, like no one can bring you down. It's like, oh, giddy up. This is working. This is finally working. This whole thing is working.
Yeah,
And
I can't wait for that.
it's a good feeling, man. It's a good feeling because that's when your hard work starts to pay off. And it is hard work, and that hard work never ends. There's no like, you might get a little bit more comfortable because you're used to the roller coaster. That's kind of where I'm like, I'm anticipating the lows. And so when the lows get there, I don't freak out anymore. I utilize that downtime to work on other things. And so, yeah, you just kind of adapt to your ever changing scenarios, and that's all part of it. But yeah, it's super rewarding for sure. And you'll get there, man. I mean, we talk about that a lot. I mean, we have our own private conversations where we're kind of like, we're just hanging out, telling stories, but in essence, we're building ourselves up and kind of like giving each other the motivational pep talks that we really.
Yeah, I was going to say we're both giving each other pep talks a lot at the
Yeah, it
minute.
helps. I mean, it really does. I mean, I always leave these conversations like with a go get 'em attitude,
Yeah, yeah, same.
which is
Yeah,
good. I mean, that's what true friendship is. I feel like that's, you're almost accountable to each other, where you're like, what steps are you taking? You moving into that shop space? Are you, what's going on? Like,
oh, yeah, you best believe if you get this shop and you're not like churning cars out every other month and you're messaging me saying you're struggling for rent and stuff like that, I'm going to be like, you better go out and buy some cars.
And how would you say you better pull your finger out?
Better pull your finger out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been awesome, man. I know this is like usual scenario. We do this all the time now, it seems
Yeah,
like, but
it's just like a normal Zoom
yeah,
call.
yeah. And recording this is something I wanted. I mean, every time we hang out, we do like a Zoom call or Instagram or whatever. It's like, we should have just recorded this. This was basically a podcast episode. Why didn't we record that? And
Yeah,
getting bogged down with all the logistics of all the gear, I mean, yeah, I'd much rather would have recorded everything with all the proper podcast gear. But I mean, although quality level of this particular episode is below what they normally would be, I just want to keep the content coming out, because having like a conversation with you, we always end up talking about motivational stuff. And I feel like other people that are in the same scenario or same situations that we are need to hear other people like us kind of talk about the ins and outs of, and the highs and lows and all that sort of stuff. And so maybe,
yeah. I always look for podcasts that talk about that sort of stuff. So for us to do one is huge.
yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, and maybe the next one or the next few, we'll figure out on your end, how to like record an hour plus without having to divvy time up. Just logistically be able to figure out how to do it with a higher quality, so anyone watching or listening gets like a better experience of consuming that content. But for now, I'm super stoked that we were able to just screen record this and just get this out into the ether.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Even
it's been a roller coaster, but we've got there in the end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this was like take 3, I think, on just trying to like
Yeah,
record it. But this turned into like just a normal conversation. That's what I wanted, because when we recorded the first one and then it was botched and we immediately tried to redo the first episode, it was like trying to think back on, okay, what did we talk about that were really good points, and try to like redo
yeah,
those. So now that it's been a couple weeks later, that's what I said. I'm like, let's just hang out and talk. If we cover the same stuff that we talked about before, good. If we don't, it's a natural conversation, and that's all this needs to be in order to flow, basically.
yep.
But well, dude, plug what you got going on. Instagram, YouTube, plug it. Let's hear it. Where can people find what you're doing?
So Instagram at Ain't Dead Yet Garage. It's the same on Facebook as well. YouTube is Ain't Dead Yet Garage. I do have a big cartel. I think that's ain'tdeadyet.bigcartel.com. I've only really got stickers on there at the minute, but I do merch drops every now and again. So yeah, any work that you want doing, machine work, welding. I even do bits of mechanical, like coilover installs, stuff like that. Feel free to drop me a message on anything. I should see it. It's very rare that I miss a message. But yeah, small independent machine shop type deal. do a bit of TIG welding, mess with cars. That's about it.
That's what we're doing.
That's it.
That's what we're doing. Well, same as always, John.Ludwick on Instagram, JOHN.LUDWICK. Ludwig's Garage on Instagram, and the Governor's Club, the Rising Sea, if you want to listen to the music. The YouTube is youtube.com/John Ludwig. If you're watching, you're already there. Spotify has some links in the description. Apple Music and iTunes don't, unfortunately, but links to the YouTubes are on the Instagrams. This has been another episode of LUDWICK'S podcast. A little bit different platform this time around, but more than happy to finally get my good friend Ben Walker on here. Ben, thanks so much for taking the time. It is currently midnight your time on a Sunday night, so thanks for taking the time to get this done.
Yeah, it's been an honor.
Dude, we'll do it again. We'll figure it out.
Yeah,
we'll figure out the logistics. We'll get a better quality audio and video wise done. But in the meantime, check Ben out on Instagram and YouTube. He's got his own YouTube channel. He's doing more there. And we will see you guys in the next episode.
Peace.
Bye-bye.